Click the first link in the description for the best Askreddit content. AITA for giving my son a bill for half his expenses. My son, 17, asked me for a new gaming system and I said no because he already has plenty of gaming systems and games and doesn't need more. If he wants one he can save up and buy one. He then comes to me with a budget on how we can afford the system. It was mostly just that if I buy nothing for myself for 2 months, we'll have enough for the system. I told him hell no, it's offensive and if he wants the system he has to save up for it. Then he comes back with another budget. He and his father calculated how much I've been paid in child support over the years and they decided it would be a good idea to let me know how little a drop in the bucket the gaming system would be. Told him I spend that on his expenses every month but he didn't believe me, so I told him that if he doesn't think so, he can pay me for his expenses every month and I'll give him the child support. Surprise surprise, when I gave him the bill, it showed that when you factor in all of the things I pay for in a month, it's much more than child support. Child support doesn't even cover 30%. Now my ex is yelling at me for making our son feel like an expensive burden, but I think I was teaching him a lesson about money and unteaching him some of what my ex says about support. AITA for giving him a bill. ETA, not able to comment, but just wanted to say this isn't a question of being able to afford the console. I can afford it, but that doesn't mean he should just get it. NTA, your son was way out of line to come to you with his child support numbers. That was dad stirring the pot, but your son's 17 and was being an ass. Go to your kid and tell him that you knew he was going to be expensive when you had him and that you love him more than money and always will. P.S. Your ex is a douche who doesn't like his kid knowing how much more you've done for your son financially. NTA, would have been an R move to give your son a bill just to shame him, but that's not what you did. Your son was incredibly entitled and rude to you. He and your ex both implied you take the child support and spend it on yourself. You proved otherwise. And you're right. You did teach him a lesson about finances and how expensive it is to raise a child. Edit. Also, not that this isn't obvious, but a gaming system isn't a necessity. It's important you also explain to him the difference between a want and a need. Bills, food, clothing, toiletries all need to come before luxuries. NTA, if his father wants to interject, why doesn't he buy the system? That being said, I would sit down and explain that he isn't a burden but new gaming systems are a luxury item. Can maybe help him come up with a strategy to save his own money or suggest he take on work outside the home. He is going to be an adult soon. If his father wants to interject, why doesn't he buy the system? Because his whole point was I pay child support already, that should go to the gaming system. Why am I stuck paying for things for this kid when I already do the legal minimum? Which is why the ops response was great, fighting resentment with facts. AITA for not allowing my disabled neighbor to park in my driveway and getting her car towed, despite the previous owner allowing it. Bought her house a few months ago and moved in last month. The previous owner was a friendly old man that could no longer live alone, so he decided to sell and move in with his daughter. Just to be clear, I put disabled in quotation marks because the lady in question is just really overweight and I am not sure if that counts as disabled. Now apparently he had been allowing use of his driveway to his disabled neighbor lady largely because street parking is extremely limited and what little street parking there is pretty much instantly occupied. What I am saying is unless you have a driveway you end up having to park a good 5-minute walk away and that's the best case scenario. Obviously I was unaware of this, so I was surprised to see a large SUV parked in my driveway when I moved in. I ended up having to knock on several doors asking whose car it was because the movers could not stand still on the busy road too long. I figured out it was the neighbor's car, so after a good 10 minutes of knocking an extremely angry enormous lady opened the door. I told her to move the car and she immediately started arguing that the neighbor said it was fine. I told her he moved out, I moved in and no it is not fine and to move it because the movers need to unload my stuff. She begrudgingly did. I ended up seeing her walking back half an hour later completely wet with sweat. Now a few days later I went back to work and lo and behold, the SUV is parked in my driveway again. I go over there again, spend 20 minutes knocking on the door before this lady opens the door, again, visibly angry. I tell her to move her car. My driveway is not public parking. She protests, saying her ankles can't take walking the distance and claims I can easily walk. I tell her that while that might be true, it's my goddamn driveway and I want to park there myself. Again she moves her car. Again I spot her half an hour later drenched in sweat making her way home. Well, it happened again a week ago and this time she would not open her door. I got tired of it and had her SUV towed. She of course came to my house to scream at me. I told her to get the hell off my property. A few days later I had a small fence installed with a lock on it to make sure it did not happen again. I have since been getting dirty looks from her and one other neighbor, and when I told my mom she told me I should be nicer to people. I do feel sort of bad too. She clearly struggles with the walk after all. NTA. You bought a house with a driveway. It's yours. If she's truly disabled, she can contact the city to have them designate a handicap parking spot. If she had handicap tags, she can use that. Otherwise, she's trespassing. You were nice the first time it happened. Second time it happened, you were under no obligation to continue being nice. The third time it happened, she knew good and damn well what she was doing and she still did it anyway. I'd have had the car towed too. NTA. NTA. Plain and simple. She should get a handicapped spot designated for her if it really is that much of an issue. NTA, this is your house and your driveway. You asked her several times nicely but she ignored you. Her situation is not your fault and not your problem to solve. I know it ain't my fault or responsibility, it's more so a guilt/feeling bad thing. AITA for walking out after a boss tried to refuse to accept my resignation. I had a boss who was a real turd. He labored under the delusion he was an excellent boss and couldn't put together that his behavior and the crappy pay was why he had such a hard time keeping employees. He also thought it was acceptable to call his female employees hun, sweetie, and sugar. He was a condescending asswipe who consistently passed over more qualified women for promotions in favor of promoting less qualified men. I had to stay until I could find a better job because I enjoy eating, and couldn't afford to leave unless I had something else. I got an interview with a competitor who hired me on making more than I made with him. I turned in my 2 weeks and he said, "Oh sweetie, you know you can't leave." I said I absolutely am leaving. He got the smuggest look on his face and said, "Well, I'm not accepting this, sugar. Guess you're here to stay." I got so furious and decided that was it. I said, "Well, screw this then." I quit. Effective immediately. Called my new job, explained what happened in front of him as he sat there slack-jawed and agreed start the next day. I packed my stuff and left. A former co-worker said it was an asshole thing for me to just up and quit on the spot. But if he refused to accept the resignation he could easily have tried to screw me over when my last day did come. My new boss says he deserved it and I'm not the asshole for quitting like I did. My boyfriend says he can see how other employees might feel like I was an asshole by making them cover my absence, but sees how I'm not the asshole for walking out of that toxic environment. So just because I'm curious, I thought I'd ask here. AITA? NTA. 2 weeks notice is a courtesy that your former boss did not deserve, and that her former boss declined. NTA. He can't refuse your resignation. Apparently he can refuse it, he just can't stop her from leaving anyway. NTA. Resigning is not asking permission to leave, it's letting them know that you're leaving and what day you will stop turning up. Barring the military and certain other rare exceptions, you can walk out any time you want, whether he chooses to accept it or not. The only time I knew of a boss refusing a resignation was a place I worked where the teenage son of a woman who had worked there for years, and had got him a temporary job over Christmas, was caught stealing. She handed in her resignation the next day and the boss told her he wasn't accepting it. No one blamed her or thought any less of her, it was just a stupid teenage thing. He stayed, and happily stayed for years after. NTA. The way your former boss responded to your giving notice made my skin crawl. You were right not to accept his condescension and harassment. Go enjoy your new, better job.